In this episode, we do a final mixed spaced retrieval drill that pulls from everything you have practiced across governance, program design, lifecycle oversight, controls, metrics, incidents, third-party risk, decisioning, and culture. The purpose is to strengthen your ability to recall the right concept quickly even when the scenario does not announce what it is testing. On exam day, questions rarely arrive neatly labeled as governance or lifecycle, and they often blend multiple themes, which is why mixed practice is so valuable. As you listen, you are not expected to answer out loud, and you are not expected to be perfect. You are expected to pause mentally at each retrieval prompt, form a clear answer in your head, and then compare your answer to the explanation that follows. This is how you build speed without sacrificing judgment, because the act of retrieving is what makes concepts available under time pressure. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Start by retrieving the simplest definition of risk that still drives good decisions. Risk is the possibility of harm or loss, paired with a reason it could happen and a sense of what it would affect. Now immediately retrieve the difference between a risk, an issue, and uncertainty, because those three distinctions are high yield. An issue is already happening and needs containment and response, while uncertainty is what you do not know and becomes risk only when it could cause harm if unmanaged. If you can retrieve those distinctions quickly, you are less likely to overanalyze an issue that needs action and less likely to overreact to uncertainty that needs targeted validation. Now retrieve what triage is designed to do under pressure. Triage sorts risks into actions so you can move forward without analysis paralysis. The triage lens you should recall includes impact, likelihood, and time sensitivity, because those three allow you to choose a safe first move even with incomplete information. Now retrieve governance as a concept, but do it in plain language and then connect it to program and lifecycle. Governance is the oversight system that sets direction, assigns decision rights, defines accountability, and checks alignment with obligations and values. A program is the operational system that turns governance into repeatable workflows, such as intake, tiering, control selection, monitoring routines, and escalation paths. Lifecycle oversight is the discipline of managing risk before deployment, during use, and after change, because AI systems evolve and risk can rise quietly over time. Here is your first mixed prompt. If a scenario describes a high-impact AI system and nobody is sure who can pause it, what layer is broken? The correct retrieval is governance, because unclear authority and accountability will block any effective control. A risk leader response restores decision rights and escalation paths so action is possible when harm is plausible. Now retrieve the concept of a control and what makes a control practical rather than performative. A control is a safeguard that reduces risk, detects problems, or helps correct harm, and it should be judged by whether it changes outcomes in practice. Practical controls fit real workflows, are enforceable, and produce evidence that they were performed. A mixed prompt now. If a scenario describes employees using an unapproved generative tool because the approved process is slow, which control pattern is most likely to reduce risk sustainably? The correct retrieval should include safe alternatives paired with clear policy boundaries, because prohibitions without workable alternatives drive shadow use and reduce visibility. You might also recall that monitoring can help detect misuse patterns, but prevention requires making the safe path the easy path. This prompt blends policy, culture, and control design, and the answer works because it addresses the risk driver rather than blaming individuals. Now retrieve data-related concepts because many exam questions hide data risk inside normal operations language. Data classification is labeling data by sensitivity, so protections match risk, and data lineage is tracing where data came from and how it moved. Leakage is sensitive information leaving approved boundaries through inputs, outputs, or connections, and it tends to be irreversible once exposed. A mixed prompt here. A team wants to connect an AI assistant to internal repositories to increase accuracy, but the repositories contain confidential incident notes and customer data. What is the best first governance move? The best retrieval includes constraining data access and limiting knowledge sources to curated, customer-safe content, because expanding access increases leakage and privacy exposure. You should also recall that a controlled rollout and monitoring can support learning, but the first move is to reduce exposure by preventing unnecessary sensitive access. This is a blend of data governance, lifecycle readiness, and practical control selection, and the tiebreaker is reversibility because leakage is hard to undo. Now retrieve decisioning concepts and why they increase stakes. Decisioning is when model output influences an outcome such as approval, denial, prioritization, or intervention, and risk rises when outcomes affect rights, access, or safety. Human oversight is meaningful human accountability, not just a person in the room, and automation bias is the tendency to overtrust confident outputs. A mixed prompt. An organization uses a model to rank job candidates, and managers start interviewing only the top-ranked applicants because time is limited. What is the first control that reduces harm? The best retrieval includes setting boundaries on how the ranking can be used and requiring human accountability that prevents the model from being a sole gatekeeper. You should also retrieve that fairness evaluation and monitoring across groups are important, but boundary setting and oversight are the immediate protections when the model's influence is growing. This prompt blends human behavior risk, fairness risk, and governance boundaries, and the best first move reduces exposure quickly while deeper evaluation continues. Now retrieve fairness and bias in plain language, because the exam often tests whether you can recognize unfair impact without needing complex statistics. Bias is a systematic pattern that produces unfair or distorted outcomes, often because data reflects historical patterns or because performance differs across groups. Fairness is the goal of reducing unjustified differences in outcomes, and proxies are variables that appear neutral but correlate with sensitive attributes. A mixed prompt. A model's overall accuracy looks strong, but complaints cluster from a particular demographic group that feels the system treats them worse. What should you do first? The best retrieval is not to dismiss complaints due to averages and not to declare the model biased without evidence. A risk leader first move is to investigate the pattern through targeted evaluation and monitoring, while constraining exposure if harms could be significant, because clustered complaints are a signal of uneven impact. This answer integrates lifecycle monitoring, proportionality, and the idea that fairness is discovered through patterns over time, not just through one-time tests. The correct response is disciplined, not reactive, which is what the exam rewards. Now retrieve transparency, explainability, and traceability as distinct terms, because questions often use them interchangeably to confuse you. Transparency is being clear about what the system does and its limitations. Explainability is providing understandable reasons for outputs or outcomes, and traceability is reconstructing what happened through records, versions, and logs. A mixed prompt. A customer challenges an adverse outcome influenced by an AI system, and regulators ask how the decision was made. Which capabilities matter most? The best retrieval includes explainability for reasons, traceability for reconstruction, and accountability for who owns the decision, because regulators and affected individuals need defensible explanations and evidence. Transparency also matters because misleading communication increases reputational and regulatory risk, but the core requirement in an adverse decision scenario is explainability and traceability backed by evidence. This prompt blends governance, legal expectations, and operational records, and the right response is to ensure decision pathways are explainable and auditable. Now retrieve monitoring and metrics as decision tools rather than as vanity reporting. Key Risk Indicator, KRI, is a metric designed to signal rising risk and trigger action, and thresholds define when action must occur. A mixed prompt. A dashboard shows a rising trend in unsafe output flags for a customer-facing assistant, but the team argues that the overall volume is still small. What is the better leadership move? The best retrieval is to treat rising unsafe flags as a risk signal, assess time sensitivity, and apply containment or constraints if the harm could be serious, because trend direction often matters more than raw count when exposure is increasing. You should also recall that monitoring without action is decoration, so the correct move includes thresholds, ownership, and a clear response plan. This is a blend of metrics discipline, triage, and incident readiness, and the correct answer is the one that converts signal into controlled action. Now retrieve incident response priorities because they often decide whether harm spreads or is contained early. Containment is stopping additional harm. Investigation is finding root causes, and communication must be truthful and careful about unknowns. A mixed prompt. A harmful output goes viral, and leadership wants to issue a reassuring statement immediately. What should happen first? The best retrieval is harm containment, because continuing harm destroys trust faster than imperfect messaging. At the same time, evidence must be preserved so the organization can understand what happened and demonstrate due care. Communication should follow once facts are established enough to avoid contradiction and overpromising, and it should focus on actions taken and updates planned. This prompt blends reputation risk with operational response, and the correct answer is the one that prioritizes protecting people and stopping exposure. Now retrieve third-party risk because vendor reliance often creates hidden assumptions. Third-party risk is the risk that a vendor's practices, controls, outages, or terms create harm, and accountability remains with the deploying organization. A mixed prompt. A team says the vendor guarantees the model does not retain prompts, so there is no leakage risk. What is the best response? The best retrieval is to require due diligence and evidence, clarify contractual terms, and still apply boundaries on sensitive data inputs, because vendor claims are not a substitute for governance. You should also recall that even if the vendor behaves well, internal misuse can still create leakage risk, so safe alternatives and clear data rules remain important. This prompt blends vendor management, data protection, and practical controls, and the best answer reduces reliance on assumptions by creating defensible oversight. Now retrieve shadow AI as a signal of unmet needs rather than only a compliance violation. Shadow AI is unmanaged use outside governance, often driven by convenience and pressure. A mixed prompt. Monitoring shows frequent access to public AI tools from managed devices, and teams deny using them. What is the best next move? The best retrieval includes discovery that is non-accusatory, focused on understanding workflows and risk hotspots, paired with a safe alternative that meets real needs and a clear policy boundary on sensitive data. If enforcement is the only response, teams will hide more and visibility will worsen. If alternatives and clarity are provided, use is more likely to shift into governed pathways. This prompt blends culture, incentives, and control design, and the correct answer protects the organization by improving visibility and reducing the need for hidden workarounds. Now retrieve the idea of second-line mindset, because many questions implicitly test how oversight should behave. Second-line work challenges and validates without blocking by focusing on decision-relevant evidence, proportionality, and enforceable controls. A mixed prompt. A product team claims a new AI feature is safe and wants immediate approval, but evidence is thin and monitoring is not defined. What is the best oversight response? The best retrieval is to constrain scope or stage rollout while requiring minimum validation and monitoring evidence, because that reduces exposure while uncertainty is resolved. The second line does not need to stop all progress, but it must avoid overpromising safety without evidence. This prompt blends governance, program readiness, and lifecycle discipline, and the best response balances momentum with defensible safeguards. Now retrieve the idea of practical controls versus checkbox controls, because distractors often propose actions that look compliant but do not change outcomes. A mixed prompt. An option proposes a broad policy update and a training campaign as the primary response to repeated leakage incidents. Another option proposes restricting data access, enforcing review gates, and providing a protected internal drafting tool. Which is better and why? The best retrieval is that the second option changes exposure and behavior directly, while the first may help long-term but does not reliably prevent the next incident. Policy and training can be supporting controls, but they are often insufficient as first controls when exposure is active and irreversible harms are possible. This is a blend of timing, enforceability, and outcome focus, and the correct choice is the one that reduces harm fastest and can be verified with evidence. If you can reason this way quickly, you will avoid many exam traps that reward action over intention. Now do a final retrieval integration in your head by replaying the AAIR mental model as a short story. Governance sets boundaries, accountability, and thresholds. The program creates repeatable intake and control selection. Lifecycle discipline ensures validation, monitoring, and reassessment, and controls provide practical safeguards that reduce exposure and support response. When you can retrieve that story, you can solve almost any scenario because you can locate what layer is failing and what action restores control. You also remember that the best next step is often a constrained, enforceable move that protects people while learning continues, rather than a grand plan that delays action. This is what makes you faster and calmer. You are not searching for memorized phrases. You are running a structured decision process. As we close, this final mixed-spaced retrieval drill is designed to make the core AAIR ideas available instantly and reliably under exam conditions. You practiced pulling risk definitions and triage lenses without hesitation, connecting governance to program mechanisms and lifecycle oversight, and selecting controls based on exposure, reversibility, and enforceability. You rehearsed high-yield themes like leakage prevention, decisioning boundaries, fairness signals, transparency and traceability needs, incident containment priorities, vendor oversight, and shadow AI dynamics. Most importantly, you practiced the habit of identifying the risk driver and choosing the first action that changes the risk state in a defensible way. That habit is what turns knowledge into judgment, and judgment is what the exam is measuring. This episode is your final mixed practice, and it should feel like your thinking is now structured enough that you can stay calm and decisive no matter how complicated a scenario looks.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.